Okay, so we've been working a lot in Max with patch cords, and that's great, but it gets a little old after a while, especially when your patches become more complicated, or, as we're about to do, when you start getting into the poly object and dealing with everything that's within poly. And you want to send stuff into poly that changes values, but it's a separate patch, it's an abstraction. You got to deal with that. So, how do we do with this? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to introduce a couple of new objects, which are send, and it's going to give me an error because I didn't give it a message yet. I need to give it a argument, so let's do send test1. And then that is going to go to receive test1. So this is kind of cool. Let's just create how about a dial? And then I'm going to send that to another dial. There we go. So even though I'm only sending to this test1 object, if I change the value of those dials, hey, it changes the value of this one that's connected to receive. I can also create another receive test1, and we're going to hook up a integer box and get that value, because all the dial is sending is an integer, out there. So this allows you to create virtual buses in Max that will send and receive control data. And you can send to any number of named receives, and they will all receive the exact same data at once. This is super important conceptually, that I can have one send and I can have 500 receives, and as long as the send and the receives all have the same name for the argument, it will work. And in fact, I can test that by duplicating like crazy, and then guess what? How cool is that? Now, that said, there is some other stuff to take a look at, which is that with control data, I don't have to use the full send and receive. I can call this S and R for short, and guess what? It still works. Woo! Nice. You're probably wondering if we can do the same thing for audio. Yes, we can. So let's create a really basic set of audio objects. We're just going to use pink noise. I'm going to have a gain object. And I'm going to have my EZDAC connected to gain. Now, there is a difference. Obviously, I have to use tildes. We're going to do send test2, connect it, receive tilde test2, and connector up. And let's see if we get some pink noise when I increase the gain. Oh yeah, that is what we're looking for. Remember that if you have debug for event and signal probe turned on, you can hover your mouse over the cables, and if audio is being processed, it will show you what's coming out. So yeah, I am in fact getting audio signal coming from this receive, even though it's only coming from up here and there's nothing in between. And again, I can do this with multiple send and receive. So I'm going to do one for the left and one for the right of EZDAC. And it works perfectly. That said, there is one major difference with the audio version of send and receive, and that is there is no abbreviated version. You can't do R tilde and use that as a receive. You can't do S tilde and use that as a send. It is send tilde, receive tilde if you're doing audio, whereas with control data, it's S and R. So just something to be aware of. I tend to prefer to use the shortcut of S and R for control, and then the full names for audio because that's the only option you have.